Expressing anger, an extensive analysis of Logan's statement in SvSR. Let's talk about Logan's statement here, shall we? Until recently, the last plot-specific episode, Putting Others First, also known as Selfishness vs. Selflessness Redux, showed something unique about Logan that not many people have mentioned since. Logan spoke up about his frustration. This may seem insignificant, but just hear it out. Typically, Logan states facts and provable truths. When speaking, he sticks to what he knows and what he believes will be useful for the topic at hand. However, he has had moments of frustration, annoyance, and anger, alongside other emotions that he may or may not even be aware of, that don't necessarily counter the facts he relays, but can change their meaning and interpretation. In these moments, something precedes Logan's anger, and he has at times responded impulsively instead of thinking through his actions and words to decide on a better move. Take, for instance, the moment in Learning New Things About Ourselves where Roman and Logan argue for a second time about clarification, and Roman remarks that Logan wasn't just going above and beyond with clarity, but that he was going overboard with it, and that it was stupid. This finally bothers Logan enough that he crumples up the card in his fist and shouts as he throws it at Roman, hitting him in his puppet eye. Now, Logan instantly expresses shock, confusion, and then quickly regret after this moment, and then promptly apologizes for his behavior and suggests he should leave, likely to prevent the unusual situation from happening again. Logan at no point in the rest of the episode addresses what caused him to react this way. He speaks on the initial argument he and Roman had, but focuses more on the root of the problem presented there and agrees to try to do better. When it comes to his emotions, though, Logan's response is only to ever explain that he doesn't have any, which we, along with everyone else, already know is a lie, including Logan himself. Because Logan doesn't bring up his frustration, and may not have fully realized it was frustration, there is no true reconciliation from Roman about what he said that upset Logan, nor from Logan about his harmful actions towards Roman. This is a more common occurrence than one might come to expect in the series, though, as Logan is either unwilling or deems it unnecessary to address what causes his outbursts. And that's because anger doesn't just bubble out of nothing, especially not for him. Anger serves the purpose of notifying others of when they've crossed a boundary with someone, getting them to stop or change their behavior, and standing up for what someone believes in, or standing against something they don't. Which isn't a bad thing, by the way. So fast forward to Putting Others First, namely the scene where Logan is asked to provide information from a real philosopher to support what Patton was trying to tell Thomas, only for Patton to hit skip all and effectively remove Logan from the discussion. This is something far beyond having your methods labeled stupid in an argument, as Patton had asked for his help, and then when that help was provided, Patton didn't approve. But instead of saying as much, instead of beating around the bush about it, he quickly took advantage of Janice's trick to skip over Logan's dialogue. We are shown that Logan is then removed from the scene entirely, and there is no response to this action. They simply move on in their discussion as though it meant nothing. Later, when Logan, the actual Logan, resurfaces, he does something he has never done before that very moment. He expresses his frustration. Well, okay, he did technically admit once to being frustrated back in Moving On Part 1, but that was only because everyone else was also frustrated and he never mentioned anything about it beyond that. But in this particular instance, in Putting Others First, he actually expresses himself in regard to his frustration. He says it in a very passive-aggressive tone, stating,
"Not that any of you care, but I am unharmed, and I don't want to talk about it. I'm just here to deliver one last fact, then I will do you all a favor and spare you my company."
This remark is full of anger, as anyone can see, but it's very interesting if we break it down and look deeper at each individual part. First, he's addressing the other side's and Thomas's failure to respond to the action, wrongdoing, made against him by Patton and Janice earlier. He specifically says, "Not that any of you care," which is a very emotionally charged thing to say for someone who prefers to stick to facts and stay objective. He is assuming that they do not care, which could have easily been inferred by their lack of reaction and failure to respond to the action made against him earlier. But even if it was true that they didn't care, Logan would have no way to know that it was absolutely true. But regardless, he is stating this as though it is a fact. Just a note, I think they probably did genuinely care even if they didn't show it, but they were all clearly caught up in Thomas's problem and what Patton had to say about it that they pushed any concern for Logan down to a very low priority in that moment. This is odd because, as we've seen throughout the series, Logan doesn't often pick up on mood shifts and appropriate responses within conversation. His EQ, emotional quotient as they say, is rather low, mostly meaning that he's prone to not always recognizing or understanding emotions, both his own and others, not always picking up on body language or sarcasm or changes in tone, not often knowing how to communicate effectively in certain situations, and he's often caught off guard when he has any kind of strong emotional reaction to something himself, as he's usually unaware of why that would happen. However, there is one thing he seems to do when he's frustrated or annoyed that we've seen in multiple episodes, which is that he states what he thinks very bluntly. Now, this can be difficult to pick up on, as Logan tends to speak very bluntly and concisely at all times, but the distinction to look for is the underlying emotion that is present in specific moments. Take, for example, his part in the Incomplete song from Learning New Things About Ourselves. After Thomas says, "Actually, that was for your benefit," and Logan responds rather bluntly, "I don't see how that can be relevant," while this was rude within its context, he's mostly just speaking honestly in that moment. He is saying outright that he does not understand why this has anything to do with the discussion they were having. However, he is frustrated because he believes the song is a waste of time, taking away from the actual topic at hand. And he wants to say this objectively and resolutely, but he is angry, and that anger coats his words, whether intentional or not. As such, his comment about relevance doesn't sound like someone who's just confused. It sounds like someone who thinks they know better and is rudely telling them off for doing something wrong. And that's how tone change works. And because his words are perceived as rude and undermining, everyone around him reacts emotionally, which Logan then responds to with emotion as well. He's annoyed, and it becomes more prevalent as he goes head-to-head with Thomas, purposely pinpointing Thomas's negligence and desire to distract himself from the actual issue, because that's what Logan thinks all these singing and puppets really is, another distraction from the work that needs to be done. It's not until later, when he realizes this was a creative way to work through the problem for Thomas, and was not actually a distraction, mostly, that he releases his frustration and the tension he had throughout most of the episode, where he then continues to speak bluntly, but without that underlying emotion tinting it. Back to putting others first, his remark that the others do not care is steeped in the same emotion, but far more intensely here. And while his words may seem blunt because of how he's speaking, they aren't blunt at all. They're actually quite sharp. He is purposely targeting them emotionally by saying, "Not that any of you care," and leaving no room for argument. He is stating it as if it were a fact, and likely knows that this will hurt them emotionally to possibly give them pause to reflect on their own actions, or lack thereof, and feel regret over it. It's a form of retribution, something that anger is all about. He wants them to feel how he felt. In essence, this is a counterattack, a strike in return for the strike he received. Moving on, he states that he is unharmed. Again, he is stating this as a fact, but this time likely because it is a fact, physically at least. But why mention it? He is, again, poking at their emotions by bringing forward their disregard to his safety due to their own actions. By saying, "I am unharmed," what he means is, "I could have been." And with the precursor of "not that any of you care," he's implying that they would not care if he was actually hurt, and stating it altogether as though he knows it as a fact. Again, this is a phrase built for retribution. It's meant to evoke an emotional response from the others, to bother them and make them regret what they've done, which seemed to work given their reactions. What's a little odd is that if this was only about any kind of physical harm, the others should be able to easily recall Logan stating how he as a metaphysical being could not be physically harmed back in dealing with intrusive thoughts when he endured multiple attacks from Remus. He showed that these have no real-world impact, and kept very calm and unbothered throughout it, all to prove to Thomas and the other sides that things would be okay and that they shouldn't be scared. So, if they remembered Logan couldn't be physically harmed, they would have no reason to worry if he was okay after what happened with the skip all button. But Logan knows how much they did worry back in dealing with intrusive thoughts, so much so that he had to show them multiple times that he was perfectly fine throughout it. So, given that Logan was angry in this moment and wanted to provoke them, this just adds to that fodder. He wanted them to think about if he had gotten hurt and how he believed they wouldn't care if that happened. He wanted them to feel bad for not caring about him, regardless of whether it was even possible for him to get hurt in the first place. We'll not get into emotional harm here either, as Logan wouldn't have admitted to it if that was the case, and while it definitely had an emotional impact on him, he clearly didn't want to address that, which is likely why he didn't clarify the type of harm in his statement. After this, he states, "And I don't want to talk about it." Again, this is probably the truth, as he is speaking about himself and what he wants, and he would know with certainty if that is true or not. But here's the thing. When was the last time Logan has been shown to express what he wants? It's been a long time, so I actually went ahead and dug through every episode just to find out. There are 4 instances in the series where he mentioned wanting or not wanting something. The most recent being Learning New Things About Ourselves, wherein he inferred he did not want to be seen as a joke as he needed to be taken seriously in order to do his job. The only instance where he blatantly stated that he wants anything was in Accepting Anxiety Part 1, when Thomas asked him if he wanted the other sides to weigh in on the issue, and Logan told him that he did want that, hoping to quickly resolve the matter at hand. But regardless, the point here is that this isn't really something Logan typically does. In this moment in putting others first, however, this is very noteworthy, and the reason is because what Logan is doing here with this statement is establishing a boundary. He is stating resolutely that he doesn't want to talk about his situation. He's expressed that he believes the others don't care about him, and he's leaving it at that, with no room for their excuses, and then making it clear that he wants everyone to move on with the discussion and not talk to him about it. It's easy to think this may be untrue, that he does want to talk about it, but that it's maybe too fresh a wound to be comfortable doing so right now. But Logan is the type to be upfront and speak honestly. If he was bothered and did want to discuss this later, he would have said that, even while angry. But instead, what he stated was that he did not want to talk about it, establishing a clear and concise boundary, meaning the others should listen to that and respect it. In case you're wondering, this is also why Logan raises his voice afterward when Patton immediately tries to placate him, which he just outright stated he did not want them to do. But, like was mentioned already, this is one of the only times Logan has ever established a boundary for himself. He is someone who tends to find ways to adapt for the benefit of Thomas and the other sides, and this often leaves him very open for making mistakes, experiencing failure, and enduring ridicule. And yet, through all of this, he doesn't often state what he wants. He has on many occasions mentioned his suggestions for Thomas to improve himself, but he doesn't tell Thomas or the other sides to adapt for him. You could argue that all the sides do this, but, well, no, Logan is still an outlier here. The other sides are a lot more open by comparison, as surprising as that may be, about what they want, either of or for Thomas, of the other sides, or just in general. Patton, for instance, is very particular about what Thomas should and should not do, which is kind of part of the whole morality shtick, but he is also very expressive of his own wants for Thomas, even just things like adopt that puppy or eat that cookie, as well as his wants for the other sides. Roman is an interesting case, as he may express desires, but he dresses them up with pride and confidence to mask the insecurity they're riddled with. There's uncertainty in most of his behavior, namely in expressing what he wants, especially for Thomas and for himself. He wants things, but he's very hesitant to ask for what he really wants, and seems very worried about anyone knowing what that is without him saying as much. Virgil started out as the equivalent of a temperamental stray raccoon, being carefully offered a treat, just hissing and spitting insults in an attempt to keep everyone else away, but still technically expressed what he wanted, or rather didn't want. As time has passed, though, he's still quite direct with Thomas when something needs changed, especially if he believes it will protect him from any number of things, and he's gotten much more comfortable even telling the other sides when he wants something too. Janice and Remus are also a fun case, because spending so much time neglected as they did, the second they had their chance, they pretty much came out swinging to get their word in, once Thomas was willing to hear it, even if only briefly. Janice, of course, never shows his hand, pun intended. He's very indirect about his wants. Until his frustration gets the better of him, that is. He knows what he wants, but he kinda just wants it to happen. He'd clearly rather play mind games to get things to go his way, rather than state anything outright, which makes him a bit similar to Roman, in a way. Remus, on the other hand, was very straightforward about how he wanted to be perceived, and he doesn't really care what he has to do to get others' attention on whatever he wants. Even if he has to do a lot of legwork to get results, he will typically make his desire clear and let it stand on its own. So he has a bizarrely similar style to Patton with how he goes about it, if a bit more dramatically. But that all brings us back to Logan, who just really doesn't say what he wants much of the time. Sure, he makes suggestions if there could be benefit to Thomas, such as telling Virgil and Patton to back off and dealing with intrusive thoughts, but it seems pretty clear that he does not expect anyone to cater to his wants at all, which is likely why he gets so surprised when he does get something he likes, such as in 12 Days of Christmas or in Crofters the Musical. He is definitely stubborn when he thinks he has the correct solution and believes the others are only stalling or meandering for no good reason, but that's never about something that he specifically wants to happen or has personal interest in. If it really comes down to it, Logan will concede to whatever Thomas, and often the other sides, truly wants, because he's well aware that emotions will often win out over logic when it comes to such things as desires. The point is that Logan doesn't really establish boundaries, either because he's learned that his won't be respected, or because he knows he needs to be relatively flexible to do his job. A weird example here to explain this. If Logan established a boundary that he, let's say, didn't want cookies to be eaten during discussions he has with the others. He may later realize there could be some sort of convention to eating as a multitasking behavior to keep Thomas focused, or that he needs to placate Patton or the others in order to maintain their interest in a particular topic, or maybe he will find that they learn better through a reward system. And thus, he will need to pull back this boundary that he established because he's seen that the pros outweigh the cons with more context, no matter his reason for establishing the boundary in the first place. It makes sense that he doesn't want to waste time putting some rigid rule in place if he thinks it may need to be changed later in order to do his job, and especially if the other sides won't respect it anyway. This is why we should fully believe that he means what he says about not wanting to talk about it, and that Thomas and the other sides need to respect the boundary he just established. Alright, moving on. Next, Logan explains that he only returned to give one last fact before he will be taking his leave again. This is less emotionally charged than the rest of the statement, but there is still emotion there. He's telling them that he only came back to teach Thomas something here. So he's both saying he doesn't want to be around them, but also that his priority is his function and use to Thomas, not the other sides. If he didn't have anything useful to say for this moment, he likely would have never shown back up at all. Thankfully, though, he did, as it gave him a chance to express his anger, even though he's clearly holding a lot of it back. But it's important to note that Logan is now playing into part of the problem that he's having, by only appearing in the discussion to fulfill his role and nothing more. He has come to recognize, especially due to events in this episode, that he is only needed to provide information to Thomas, and that apparently even that has its limits. Based on their words and actions, Logan believes the other sides do not want him to be included in the discussion. And, well, watch the episode. It's very understandable why he would come to such a conclusion. This was likely already the case long before this episode, given that he chose to use a less invasive method for his participation from the beginning, only to be told immediately that he was unsuccessful in this effort. Logan would not have been making efforts to exclude his presence unless he knew it was something the other sides wanted. He doesn't decide things on a whim. He would have had to have come to the conclusion that this was the best approach. Just a note, I specify other sides here because I don't know just how true it is of each individual side, or even Thomas's view on this, and I'm sure Logan isn't fully certain either. Unfortunately, due to the events of putting others first, Logan may be more inclined to believe Thomas doesn't want him there, but he may still have some hope that he actually does. So, Logan is playing into his role with this part of his statement, both in indicating that this is what he thinks the others want of him, to be absent from the discussion, and that he may believe this is all he can properly provide to them at this point. Meaning, Logan may believe the others are right to not want him around, or that he may truly only be useful if he is limited to serving his function to Thomas and nothing more. This isn't true, of course, but if a situation is presented with the same conclusion over and over again, you're more likely to believe that that same conclusion will always remain that way and never change. It's understandable if Logan has come to believe that this may be true, even if he hopes it's not. On that sad note, we get to the last part of Logan's statement, which is possibly the part with the most emotion present, though that emotion is not so much anger, but sadness. He finishes his statement by saying, "And then I will do you all a favor and spare you my company." There's a lot here. Just as was stated before, Logan believes the other sides do not want him around. And while at face value, this sentence indicates that by leaving he is doing what they want, in reality that isn't the full story. Because this part is said with those underlying emotions, anger and sadness. The anger is directed at them and the wrongdoing that was committed against Logan, but the sadness, or rather hopelessness, is more directed at what Logan sees to be the likely truth. He is angry that the other sides dismiss him and don't want him there, but he's also saddened by this, especially because he believes it must be a fact. Hope is hard to have in the face of knowledge, after all. You may want to believe the sky is orange, but there's a hell of a lot of proof that it appears blue, you know? Positive thinking only gets you so far, and at some point, you just have to face the facts and try to keep moving forward despite the negativity of the truth. And that's what Logan has been doing. He's lost that hope that maybe there is some silver lining to how he's been treated, that maybe if he adapts enough, then he'll finally be accepted. But this episode, this moment, must have been one of the absolute last straws for him, as he's certain of this truth now. If anything, he can put the positive thinking to use for their benefit instead, and also be passive-aggressive while he's at it. This is why he says, "I'll do you all a favor," in reference to him leaving. It's not just what they want, it's his gift to them. A big, shitty gift, one that hurt him a lot, but this is what they wanted, right? And shoving that in their faces, again, serves to enact that same retribution as before. He wants them to know he's been hurt and wants them to feel bad for what they've done. The only difference this time is he's not just angry, he's sad, hurt, because he knows it won't even change anything. Lastly, notice how he specifically refers to his presence as my company, which is rather interesting. It's just a synonym, sure, but company is usually used to infer companionship, that it's time spent with someone who you like to have around or someone who complements or matches you. For him to use that particular phrase, spare you my company, he's either saying one of two things here. Either one, that he sees them all as equals, but that he recognizes they can't be companions with him, as by definition they don't want to spend time with him. Or two, that he no longer wants to be companions with the others because he knows they don't see him as equal in turn, so he wants their connection severed entirely. Overall, it seems this statement from Logan is embedded with emotion, namely anger, and he said it with the intent of causing an emotional reaction from the others. He expressed his frustration. Now it'll only be a matter of whether this is ever addressed in the next plot-centric episode, or any that come after it, and if anyone even bothers to reflect on or change their behavior regarding it to see its true effect on Logan. One last thing to note. Decisions made of anger are often impulsive and not always well thought out. They're driven by emotion and the need to feel vindicated. This can often evoke regret, the feeling that you made the wrong decision after having the benefit of hindsight. It's completely possible that Logan may eventually retract the statement he made in this episode. He may review it later and realize he was too emotional, and since he wants to be seen as serious and someone who makes only objective decisions, he may regret his decision to speak in the way he did. He may decide that establishing a boundary like that could hinder his ability to continue adapting to Thomas's needs, and may wish to retract his statement to prevent this from becoming a problem, though I doubt he would, as Logan's personal concerns are rarely brought into any discussion. And he may still have hope that some of what he treated as fact was not actually true, or at least not completely true, and that the other sides do care, or that he perhaps has another chance to change himself for their betterment. That all being said, he may come to regret this decision, but may also stick by it, either out of spite or failure to receive the results of retribution that he desired. He might have come to believe much of what he said was factual and saw no need to counter it, or still has the barest hope that things can improve if he just keeps trying. In the end, my hope is that this moment is given more meaning in the future, even if it's not addressed right away in any upcoming episode. I would prefer Logan either finally stand up for himself or deal with the potential fallout or discord that comes from it, or that the others attempt to reflect on their behavior towards him and begin to change their ways. Obviously, Logan has also got quite a lot of work to do in that regard himself, but it would ultimately do him some good to speak his mind and genuinely express himself more often. Thanks for watching, listening, and/or reading along. I have intentions to repost many of my numerous essays about Sandersides here on YouTube in an audio format with the text on screen, as you just saw, as that's been requested for some time, considering the ridiculous length some of my essays can often have. I'll work on getting those out alongside the animation project I'm also working on. Please check out those videos too, if you get the chance, and let me know what you think. You're all amazing. Here's hoping we continue to get more Sandersides content again soon.